Any more seats? If you have a seat next to you, want to raise your hand, just like in school. Okay. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. On this dreary morning, but um, at Providence College, we work to control a lot of things about our program. So unfortunately, we have no control of the weather. But I know there are shuttles to help people go across campus if they need it, so please make use of them. I'm Jacqueline Kiernan McKay. I'm Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies, and I'm Director of the Parent Program. And with me is my partner in crime, Wanda Ingram. Dr. Ingram is the Senior Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies and the freshman class dean. And you may remember us from Parenting 101 during the summer, so it's good to see you all again. I feel like, too, I know so many of you for your emails that you sent me through the parent program or feedback about the newsletter or the e-communication, so keep on that feedback coming. That's great. As Father Shanley said, too, I love this weekend because we do begin to see changes coming about in your sons and daughters, thinking about move-in day and the anxiety, excitement certainly, but some of the anxiety there. And now they play the role of host as they welcome their families to their new home away from home. Our program this morning is entitled Parenting 201. Mid-semester and beyond. You see, for those of you who are involved in Parenting 101, you all got an A, so now you're in the advanced class, okay? Some of you maybe not quite an A. In our program this morning, we're going to focus on what to expect from midterm on. Again, during the summer, we spoke about the non-academic and academic adjustment issues of first-year students and all that entails. And now we're going to move on to the second part of our semester. So this morning we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with students right now, and it can be a tenseful time with it being mid-semester. Some strategies for parents that we're going to share, and we hope to have some time for questions as well. So just get comfortable, and I hope we have a nice dialogue this morning. So what's going on with students right now? Well, as we said this summer, adjustment is an ongoing process. And students are certainly at different stages of adjustment as they look to find their place in their new environment. Some already feel that sense of belonging, while others are still working to find that connection. Some have not seen their friends from high school and really miss them. New friendships are beginning to form. Remember, too, that homesickness can be on time delay. Oftentimes, feelings of loneliness and longing for what's been familiar can get worse when the excitement of the new semester has worn off. And I think particularly this time of year when students are tired, they've just finished their first set of mid-semester exams, their defenses are down, and they long for what's been familiar to them. Relationships. For some, their relationships with their roommates have been flourishing. Others, roommate situation may not have met their expectations. In any case, students have probably invested a lot of time and energy into learning to live in a new environment. And some may need to adjust their roommate expectations, that they can live harmoniously with their roommate, but maybe their roommate isn't going to be their best friend, and knowing that that's okay. Increased personal freedoms may feel wonderful, but may feel a little frightening at times as well. Some students may find that their habits and routines are beginning to be established, and those habits and routines can work for them or against them. Again, nobody's telling them to get up, when to go to bed, whether or not to go to class. It's all up to them. Time management issues. Many students find that learning how to manage their time effectively is one of the biggest challenges, and they're still struggling to find that balance. Learning how to set priorities. As one student said, in the beginning, my roommate and I would take a nap during our free time between classes. Now we know better. We can't waste that time. We need to learn how to pace ourselves, and that's what it's all about. Right now, students have just finished their first set of mid-semester exams, as I said, their first set of college exams, and mid-semester grades are slowly coming out. So it's a tension-filled time, and Dean Ingram is going to talk about some of the issues related to academics.
Good morning. I think it's an understatement when she says it's mid-semester time and there are some tensions. For some, it's panic. For some, they're saying, bring it on. Everyone's going through a lot of different kinds of emotions at this point. So I'm wearing two hats today. I'm still interim director of academic advising, and I also oversee the freshman class. So life is always very interesting for me because of those two particular areas that I'm dealing with. So many students now, as they're coming in to see me, are constantly talking about, this is so different from high school. It was something I just never expected to go through. I never expected the pace to be what it is. They have so many assumptions that what had worked so well for them in high school is still going to work for them at the college level. And I think that that kind of is starting to wear off for many as the mid-semester exams and papers and requirements are now coming through. It's also difficult, I think, for some parents to realize that their sons and daughters did so well in high school, and some are quite surprised at some of the level of distress that they're receiving from their sons and daughters when you start calling home and letting you know that, Mom, it's not going well, maybe I should change, maybe I should transfer. That word has come up quite often for some of the phone calls that I've received as of late. And if you are a parent also of a son or daughter who has had a disability, you're always usually advocating for that child in high school. And it's very difficult, I think, to kind of hold back when you're so accustomed to taking care of things, and now suddenly it's up to them to advocate for themselves and to work with Office of Academic Services in reference to accommodations, et cetera. As a parent who had a child with a disability, I understand that truly. You really do have to sometimes hold onto the chair when you're talking with them on the phone, because you really do want to pick the phone up now and take care of it for them. And then you realize they're going to have to start doing these things themselves. So it's mid-semester. That was the 24th of October. Obviously now, happy belated Halloween to everyone. They've gone through their first mid-semester exams, quizzes. Sometimes it was just turning in assignments. In some cases, students have not had to turn in anything. It depends on the nature of their class. For some students right now, it's a source of anxiety this particular time period, and for others, they're doing okay, and that's good. They're facing a lot of deadlines between now and the end of the semester, papers, final papers, quizzes, et cetera, et cetera. And they're also thinking about courses for next semester, and I think that's kind of caught quite a few students off guard because yours truly has sent out information telling them it's time again. They're not ready to deal with this time, so they're not quite sure, why do I need to deal with spring? I've actually had some send me emails or call me and say, why now? I'm going, it's because it's time. I mean, everything happens the way it does. So it's time for them to start thinking about courses for next semester, and they're trying to get through this semester. So there's a little bit of tension that occurs as a result of that. But freshmen will be registering, I believe, November 21st. So they've been told, this is not a guidance counselor that you're working with. Your academic advisor is someone who's going to help guide you, but you need to go in and you need to be prepared. So that means you need to do a lot of your homework right now in reference to looking at the various courses and the times, et cetera, et cetera. So getting ready for registration is a big one. And they're trying to get as much done, obviously, before they go home for Thanksgiving, because classes will end December 12th, whether they're ready or not. And the final exams for Western Civ begins December 15th, and the rest of the exams continue after that particular date. So it's November, and it has come upon them in some cases a lot quicker than expected, even though the calendar is the same for all of us. Stress, nothing but stress. Transition. Got A's in high school, expect the same thing for college. Not necessarily so. Exams are a big one, and I'm sure many of you have already gotten those infamous phone calls. I think they're realizing now, besides the fact that exams are so different from high school than they are at college, they cover a lot more depth and breadth in reference to the amount of information that the exam is going to be covering. The college courses are set up so differently, and the amount of time that a lot of our students have to take their exams is problematic for quite a few. Some students have actually contacted me and said, well, in high school, whenever I didn't finish with my exam, my teacher used to let me finish later on or give me a little bit more time. That does not happen at the college level, and that's problematic for quite a few students because they run out of time for that first test because they really don't know yet how to expect what's going to be covered in the exam, etc. And because some tests are true and false, or multiple choice, or fill-ins, or essay, or all the above in some cases, a lot of students do not realize you have to have a strategy for dealing with each one of those kinds of exams. So that's some of the reasons why a lot of students will run out of time, because they really haven't set things up yet to kind of figure out, I'm going to address this part now, I'll go to this part later, etc. The whole issue sometimes of anxiety tends to get in the way, and then they run out of time only because they're worrying about running out of time. So they have to kind of understand a little bit better that the professor is not going to give them hints as to what's going to be on the test. And a lot of students will still have that infamous question in class and say, well, what's going to be on the exam? And the professor tends to look at them and say, everything. And they're kind of matter of fact about it. In other words, you really need to be aware of everything that we have covered in the coursework. So students are not accustomed to that yet, so it takes time. So they're going to have to glean information from their textbook and to kind of figure out what's going to be on that exam. They're going to have to depend on their note-taking and their reading comprehension. And the pressure is great because in some cases with some of the classes, there may be a mid-semester and maybe a final. And maybe those are the only grades that their final grade will be based on. So a lot of them are worried about, okay, so how am I going to do if I don't do well on this particular test? So worrying tends to be a symptom and an issue, along with the test anxiety. And then the realization that they can't prepare for every exam the same way, and they've all brought various strengths and weaknesses to the situation. So we're finding now at this point in time, at least for the appointments that I have with students, that they're realizing that they have to integrate the material that they have, and they have to think critically about what they've learned in the classroom. They can't just memorize facts and give it back. And the development of Western Civ, and you're in a DWC room, that is one of the litmus tests in reference to students understanding that. You have to understand all of the aspects and integrate that learning and to give that information back. It's not just about facts and figures. Professors are also very different from high school. Very different. Styles of teaching are going to be different. Professors will assume when they're up in front of the class that everyone has done the homework and the preparation. They're not always going to ask that question of students. Bless you. More materials covered in a shorter amount of time. Teaching styles are one way, and with some students, learning styles sometimes will clash with that. If a student learns by example, but the professor gives a test and it's based on the readings and they have not covered that part but have talked about other facts and figures, then that's going to be a problem for the student. And our individual professors, obviously, some are more user-friendly, I find, than others. I mean, that's called being human. But they're not going to change their teaching style in most cases. And this is one of the reasons why students have to understand they have to change their strategy for learning. They have to change their strategy for learning and compensate for how things are taught in a particular class. That is the reason why professors have office hours that students need to take advantage of. So if a student is saying that they're running into trouble, please recommend that they do that. And then also going over to the Office of Academic Services, because a lot of times you're going to get those phone calls that I call the blame game, that it's all the professor's fault. I didn't do well on the test, and because the professor's so difficult. I didn't do well on this. Well, the professor was, so you're going to hear a lot of blame game kinds of stuff. First question you definitely want to ask, are you going to class? Because in some cases, if you get the ooh and the ah and you can't get the direct eye contact, I think you have your answer. You still have to go to class first and foremost. And a lot of times when professors will be up in front of the class thinking they're doing the students a favor by saying, I'm not worried about whether you come to class or not. These are the requirements. Some interpret that as, Professor so-and-so said I don't have to go to class. No, that's not what Professor so-and-so said. Okay, so that's how one interprets and how they hear things. So you have to ask that question first when you get those infamous questions, statements from your sons and your daughters. It's the reason why I end up sending for students at mid-semester, because the grades are not the whole story. A lot of times that first grade is not a reflection of how the student is doing, because by then, anything in print is going to be probably out of date and they probably have received other grades. But there are a lot of erroneous beliefs that our students have, as well as parents too, in reference to why things are not going well and why they still continue to use those same tactics. Parents, I do need to kind of warn you that to give words of wisdom in reference to how it was in the day when you went to college, okay, sometimes can be a little dangerous, all right? If you're a baby boomer, and as I am too, just think about it. The technology alone outdates us all because we didn't have computers on our desk. We didn't have computers. I mean, we were lucky if we had calculators, and we used to use slide rules in my day. So, I mean, if you know what a slide rule is, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I'll talk to you about that later. We have to go into that. But students make bad decisions because they tend to get stressed. So warn them also. Take it easy. Don't do something stupid. Although I tend not to use that word in front of my granddaughter, I'm using it here. Don't do something stupid. What I'm alluding to is the whole issue of cheating and plagiarism. So don't do something that's going to get you into trouble. If you haven't got that paper done, don't do something stupid about it. Go talk with the professor. I would rather you get a 0 for it, but don't get yourself into difficulty, because this is where sometimes bad decisions get made under that kind of pressure. Everyone has different experiences, and I think we've all kind of figured that out. But a lot of students will tell me they put so much time into what they were doing, in studying or the paper or whatever. And I tell them, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So we have to look at what it was you were doing, not how much time you spent doing it. There are a lot of erroneous beliefs, as I said before. Students a lot of times think that all their professors are going to teach the same way, or that it's a sign of weakness because they're not doing well. And if they have to go see a tutor, that means that, you can fill in the blanks. I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm not doing well because it's just me. And I tell students, everyone could benefit from using a tutor. But I was the tutor in high school. I'm not worried about your pedigree from high school. I want to hear about what you need to do about current events here. It's nothing wrong with being the tutee instead of the tutor. All right? So encourage that with your sons and daughters. If they blank out during a test, it's not like a lot of students will think, well, maybe I shouldn't be here. The class is too hard for me. No, it's called test anxiety. There's an actual term for it. And there's some people you need to talk to. There are places you need to go to get some help with that. Don't just let it go. But a lot of students start to second guess themselves and think they're out of their league at the first sign of trouble. And that's where things start to go a little crazy. So they have to trust that they were accepted for a good reason and that they can do the work. So those words of encouragement are going to be most important. They have to develop new strategies, and they have to do it sooner rather than later. When I send for students now at mid-semester, I probably will have at least half the students come in and I'll ask, have you gone to see a tutor? Well, I'm thinking about it. Christmas is coming too, December 25th, and I'm thinking about that too. I bought all my Christmas gifts. We need to do it now. Students like to wait, and I'm not sure what they're waiting for, but they like to wait. So encourage, ask those kinds of questions in reference to have you done the tutoring, et cetera, et cetera. These are the kinds of things that have to be worked on sooner rather than later. If nothing else, my life's not boring. It's nothing mundane about the day in the life of the freshman class dean. Nothing's ever the same. Every student brings something different to this. They have to develop what we call a strategy. And a lot of times students don't realize there are different strategies depending on the kinds of classes that he or she are taking. Now, there are 3 types of courses, and I go into this just very briefly with the students in a lot of cases. Elwood Chapman, who was someone who wrote about academic strategies many, many years ago, is a theorist who I've used many years and talked to students about looking at the courses, the combination of courses that they're taking. There are constant discipline courses, delayed action courses, and self-involving. You don't have to worry about those terms. I'll be telling your sons and daughters this anyway. But when we're talking about constant discipline classes, we're talking about classes like accountancy, chemistry, econ, math, all those kinds of classes that if you understand last week, it builds, this week builds on the previous week. They're building block courses in sequence. So as you start to fall further and further behind, and the professor is covering work today that was built on several weeks ago, after a while it becomes kind of a vicious circle, and you're not going to be able to necessarily catch up unless that's the only class that you have. So you may hear a student talk about, you know what, I'm falling further and further behind, and telling them, well, you need to study harder. Sometimes time is working against them because of the nature of the course. So sometimes we have to kind of recommend to a student that they may have to withdraw from that kind of a class because they're just not going to be able to catch up in sufficient time because of the nature of all their other classes. Believe it or not, those kinds of classes I don't worry as much about because most professors know enough to maybe have a quiz every week, have reviews every week, et cetera, to make sure they're staying on top of that particular work. It's the delayed action courses that are the #1 killers of freshmen, quite frankly. Those are the ones like the psychology, the sociology, history classes, where there's a great deal of reading. There may be a mid-semester, maybe a paper, and maybe a final. Those are the classes where students are infamous in saying, well, I don't have any homework tonight, so I'll go out with the group. Yeah, you probably have homework. It's probably what you've read in the syllabus, and you're supposed to be completing at least chapters 1 through 6 for your reading, and you haven't done it yet. Those are the kinds of things that are so easy to put off. So the delayed action courses are the ones where students need to stay on top of, but they have to be more self-disciplined to stay on top of that. How many here, sons and daughters, are procrastinators? Okay, delayed action courses are dangerous, very dangerous, all right? Self-involving courses are the ones that we're talking about, are more the art classes, drama, music. Most students who are in those fields, I think they already know how to self-regulate. Those are a little bit more difficult too, because usually the learning is a different climate, the schedules are a little bit more odd, unusual standards, few exams. They usually have projects and displays that they're working on. So if they're procrastinators and they're in those kinds of classes, they already know that they're going to be in difficulty because you can't make 10 clay pots by the end of the semester within 1 week. It's just that simple, unless you're up all hours of the night, and they're not going to look too great. So I think that kind of works against the student, and they realize that. So once again, another procrastinator, beware. So those are the types of courses. This is the kind of strategy I talk with students about. Now, before I stop, I want to give you 2 complaints, and Jackie already knows where I'm coming from on these. My first complaint: email is our major way of contacting students. It's supposed to be our official form of contacting students, our official form of communication. I know our students receive a lot of emails, but the concern I have, and this is my first complaint, is that students will disregard what they receive from the dean's office, and Father Noel's not a happy camper because of that, and neither am I, yours truly, but they miss out on very important announcements. So please, first and foremost, encourage them to read what the dean's office sends to them. Because in some cases, it's me sending for them. In some cases, it's certain important deadlines. They need to take the time to read those emails. Otherwise, they're going to miss out on things, including their advisors sending for them, telling them it's time to get ready for registration, and they're going to miss those dates, and we don't want that happening. So that's my first complaint. I brought up a moment ago about send-fors. This is one of the things that I am sending to students emails about. If any student who's a freshman has any grade below a C, they are going to hear from me. So if your son or daughter has a grade below a C and they say they did not hear from me, that's my complaint, okay? Because they didn't read it, because I did send something to them, all right? So I just want you to be aware of that. We have advisory emails because a student is struggling perhaps, but there are some that maybe for whatever reason they're failing a class or things aren't looking great. I will do what we call a send for. In other words, I'm telling them they need to come in to see me. So if they call you and say, Dean Ingram sent me an email, it says I need to come see her, and they call and ask what should I do? Common sense. Okay, go make the appointment, please, all right? I've had a couple of parents who have called me instead of the kid. Not happy about that, and obviously I think you know what I said to the parent on that one. I'm not going to go into detail. All right, so in other words, don't call me, tell your son or daughter, make the appointment. That's what they need to do. Office of Academic Services is the website that I refer every single student to. So it's providence.edu, and it's /academic-services. So just remember academic-services. That is the major site that I refer just about every student to, because they have everything from soup to nuts in reference to academic skills. Dealing with CIV, test anxiety, note-taking, you name it, they have it on there. But students have to use the resources once again. And they get so overwhelmed with the amount of reading that they have to do in reference to CIV alone, or they expect the same great A because they put so much time into doing their paper instead of looking on the website to realize there's a writing center here for a reason. No matter how proficient a writer they are, they should always have someone look at their paper. You always need another set of eyes to look at whatever you've written. That's a rule of thumb for all of us, whether professionals or not. So it's providence.edu, it's /academic-services. That's the main one. So encourage them to get on that site. Go on it with them while you're here with them, visiting. just as a, table talk conversation when you're waiting for between the appetizer and the first meal or whatever, if you're taking them out to eat. We have restaurant students recommend all the time. So you want them to use those resources. So we want them to also get a sense of good time management. They need to work everything back. It needs to be what's due for the entire month, working it back to what's due for the week, and then working it back to what's due for the day. They need to start getting a handle on the work that's involved as they start to sometimes get a little unraveled and they feel like they're falling behind. Personal counseling is another excellent resource for students in reference to dealing with test anxiety or problem solving or decision making. It's located over in Bedford Hall. These are all the places that I end up recommending for students to go to when I do my various send-fors. Remind your sons and daughters that in most cases there is no such thing as extra credit anymore. In high school, a lot of times they were accustomed to that, but not necessarily the case. Some professors will kind of spring that on them and they're very happy, but don't have that as an expectation. They're going to run out of time in some cases because they have a certain grade and they want to get a higher grade, but sometimes because the number of quizzes or tests or exams or whatever, they may not necessarily be able to make that mark for first semester. They're not alone. They all seem to think that everybody's doing well. No, they're not, okay? So just kind of let them know that. So this brings up my second complaint. I know we're in a technology era, and I know my daughter knows a lot more than I do in reference to how to use my smartphone, which I don't feel very smart when I use most times, but many of our students do not write things down. They'll come in my office and I'll be talking with them about all these different referrals, the various resources. Let's talk about strategies for your various classes. And they're sitting there and they're nodding and there's no paper, there's no pencil, there's no technology. And I'm trying to figure out, how are you going to remember all of this? Oh, no, you're not. So I want you to know, if your son or daughter says I threatened them, nicely, yeah, I probably did. If your son or daughter says I probably, tossed a paper and pencil, yeah, I probably did. So I'll just be up front and just say, and if I dared them to lose that information, yeah, I probably did that too. So just know I'm telling you myself that yes, I did all these things, because that's what tends to happen in my office. So it's important to remember that the referrals that we're making are for a good purpose. Students need to understand, is it about the subject or is it about the process in reference to what might be going wrong in a class? They need to understand, if they're doing well in a class, why they are doing well in that class, so they can replicate that for the following semester. And it's amazing how many students don't know why they're doing well in Civ or some of their other classes, and that's just as important to know. So if it's the subject matter that's causing a problem for a student, referral to a tutor is most important. If it's about the process, in other words, because they do fine in reference to they understand the subject matter, but when they get into the exam, they don't do well. That's more process. That's more test anxiety and those kinds of things. So the referral depends on what's going wrong with the student in reference to subject versus process. Writing papers, making presentations, reading comprehension, test taking, etc. So tell them to be prepared for their advising sessions. There are a lot of descriptors we can use at this point in time in reference to students, sometimes feeling overwhelmed or tired, exhilarated. Some are more serious, some are very cautious. Social adjustment and academic adjustment are kind of difficult to separate out right now, and these are common transitions, so don't panic if this is your first child coming away to school. We as parents, deans, etc., all need to be on the same page in reference to making the referrals and making them early, if at all possible. I've covered a great deal of information. Just know that if your son or daughter comes to see me, we will do the best that we can in reference to getting them on track, and that stupendous A that they might expect may not necessarily be possible right now, but that's not to say it's not going to be a possibility further down the line. They need to be patient, and you need to be patient as well, obviously, and not panic and buy into it. Make sure if they didn't bring the infamous blue book that I know I talked to you about before, to tell them to come to our office, or we'll show them online how to access that information. But we all get through the process, and a lot of students are going through these transitions. We have fantastic actors and actresses, so tell your sons and daughters, there's a lot of this going on. It's fine. It's what you do about it that makes the difference. Thank you.
Wanda's the freshman dean, I'm the sophomore dean, so you can understand they're in pretty good shape after they get through her. Uh, As I said, we're partners in crime. Very quickly, I'm going to go through some strategies. How can you help your students during this stressful time? Well, to just kind of validate and reinforce what Wanda just said about use of resources. It's so hard to get students to use resources. We have wonderful academic, non-academic services on campus, and more often than not, students will say, I just want to do it myself. Why? We have all this help. I always say to students, you know, when your parents, when I pay taxes, we expect our city to give us a lot of services like garbage, collecting garbage and recycling and snow plowing sometimes. And so when you pay your tuition, you get a lot of these services too. And we wouldn't have them if we didn't think that students didn't need them. And when students walk across that stage of graduation, nobody knows who used what services. They're all celebrating their getting their degree, right? So using those services is so critical. But again, remember, you can encourage, you can recommend, but it's the student who has to make the initial contact. If you make the call to OAS, you make the call to counseling, your student's not going to be motivated to follow through, okay? It's important for you to do your homework, to know those services. Even when we have students to come in the office and they say, okay, maybe I should talk with someone in counseling, or maybe I should go to OAS. What we do lots of times is, so, well, how about if we pick up the phone and I'll dial the number and I hand the phone to the student and the student makes the appointment, talks to the secretary and makes the appointment. It's the student's appointment, not my appointment, not Wanda's appointment, not your appointment. It's the student's appointment. Next, overcome the urge to take charge. When talking to your student about something going wrong, who can you speak to? What can you do? Who can help you? How can this be resolved? That quickly gets into that issue that we talked about this summer about your new role as a coach or a mentor as opposed to a rescuer, right? What does the coach or mentor do? Guides, brainstorm strategies, but puts decision-making and follow-through on the student. What does the rescuer do? Just jumps in to solve the problem. But then what? The student doesn't learn how to solve the problem him or herself. We want to all advance students' problem-solving skills. I think at this time, again, with stress, with the exams, help them to reflect on how they coped with stress in the past. Focus on their strengths. What worked for them? Remind them of some of the positive choices that they've made. Provide examples of how they've dealt with stress. And be mindful that it's a time when students can neglect some of their physical and emotional needs. It's not unusual for students to feel overwhelmed, run down, staying up late, writing papers, studying for exams, consuming large amounts of caffeine, eating on the run. So we have student health. If they're not feeling well, if they're feeling run down, to go over to student health and make that connection. To again reinforce what Wanda is saying, make sure that they're prepared for the registration process. Encourage them to meet with their advisor well in advance. Maybe help them brainstorm some questions they need to ask the advisor. Advisors are there to help. They're trained to assist students, but they're not mind readers, right? So help them to brainstorm some questions so they'll be ready to discuss options and choices. This is particularly true, I think, for students who have already chosen a major and not sure if that major is for them, to really have some ways of beginning to address that issue. Make sure that, again, the time management issue is front and center. Students need to take responsibility for their own time, but you can provide some helpful hints. For your student who's on overload, helping them to break down big major tasks into smaller tasks. They feel like it's more manageable, and they also can feel like it's more controllable. It's more in their control. This is certainly a great time, any time is, but this is certainly a great time to send your student a care package, right? Notes of encouragement, snacks, homemade goods. One student said to me, remind them to send money to us too. So that's a special word there. Be realistic about holiday breaks. Your expectations may be quite different from your students. One mother told me last year that when she was looking forward to having her son come home for Thanksgiving, instead she felt like she was running a B&B. She said her son came home, dropped off the laundry. The rest of the time, he was either sleeping, visiting with high school friends, and connecting with coaches and talking on the phone. Right, students back there? Is that true? Yes? Okay. No, for some? Okay. And certainly, this varies from student to student. But you want to be realistic about the amount of time that your student is going to spend at home. Because for many first-year students, they need to feel that connection again with their friends from home. Not only to compare life at different colleges, but also to assure themselves that that friendship is still intact. Remind your freshmen that the best part of being a freshman is that they can say, I'm still trying to figure things out. And there's lots of support, again, to help students to do that. You can encourage them. There's always someone that they can talk to. Help them to identify that point person, whether it's an RA, a hall director, a chaplain, a dean, a counselor. And finally, don't look for a quick fix, because there isn't one, right? I do want to just remind you, a parent program, we have lots of resources for parents. In December, I do send out an e-communication to first-year student parents, talking a little bit about what to expect as your student comes home for Christmas break. Maybe taking a look at some of the rules of the house again, and your students have had a lot of freedom being away at school, and maybe negotiating some of those issues, maybe being not as rigid and maybe being a little bit more flexible. Talking with your students who maybe didn't do as well as they had expected during their first semester, and for those students who did, to celebrate with them, but also to keep in check that it's just not all about academics. They're dealing with so much and making those connections and feeling good about themselves and their new place. So we can work to do that together. Well, I think we have about 5 minutes for questions. So we have a couple of students back there. If anybody has a question, you want to raise your hand and we'll come to you with the mic. We have a question right up here, way up front.
How many students out of 1,000, what percentage have you had enrolled in your office?
Okay, so the question was, how many students do I call into my office? Well, we haven't called anybody in yet because the mid-semester grades have not actually arrived, but I average probably about 60% of the students I will make contact with that has probably one grade below a C. That's why I keep saying that your sons and daughters, are telling you they're doing stupendously well, and they probably are in some cases, but maybe that first quiz or test may have been a lower grade, and now something else has come in and taken care of it. So I would say probably about 60% I end up making contact with that have a grade below a C, and that's a shocker for some.
If we ask them to see grades, tell us, I don't have any in front of me, they can go online and show us if we go back and say, listen, is there an excuse that they could use when we can't see them? I can't get it now.
Oh, no.
I can't do this.
No, the grades are up on Cyberfire as they're coming in, but some have not really shown up on a lot of the students' degree audits yet. So they're being legitimate in some cases, saying, well, I don't have grades for a lot of my classes. It's true.
Dr. Ingram, I feel like you described my child to a T. Anxiety, sky high. Saying that the teacher didn't prepare him for the test, took the test, the professor didn't tell him the information, he studied the wrong stuff. His favorite time to text me is between 1 and 2 in the morning with his anxiety, asking if I'm up and if I can help him talk through this, which I'm going to kill him.
There you go.
I know they just had midterms. Told me he bombed every one, although the other day he told me he got an 84, an 87, and an 82 on one. I don't know what he did or how he got through it, but like as a parent, I'm so overwhelmed with these phone calls and the stress, and every time I see him text me, I don't even want to pick up my phone because I'm like, whoa. And I told him to go to the tutoring and to contact his advisor when he's struggling, and texted me at 2 in the morning saying that he worked 2 hours on one paragraph of his paper and can't do it anymore because he's exhausted. And he says he tries to, but there are appointments and he can't get through. And then he gets frustrated and just doesn't want to do it anymore. So is it true? Do they have to make appointments? Are there times when they are full, or is he just pulling the wool over my eyes and not calling and I'm believing him?
It depends on what he's trying to make an appointment for, because I know the writing tutors start to get backed up at this time of the year, and then also some of the tutors for maybe classes like math or chemistry, sometimes availability by this time is starting to get a little crowded as a result of it, and they've waited too long. But I mean, right site is what's up online, so if a student was to get on the Office of Academic Services website and click on the Writing Center, there's an online tutorial called Write Site, W-R-I-T-E site, which is a cutesy name, but the student is able to actually submit their papers online and they get feedback within 2 days. But once again, that lends itself back to the whole issue of time management. It sounds like right now he's spinning his wheels because he's fallen behind on everything. So sometimes meeting with somebody like yours truly to kind of at least kind of figure out exactly what they do or don't have under control, et cetera, is going to be key. The other thing sometimes you're going to have to do is what they call tough love, because sending text messages to you 24/7 or all the time at least, or ungodly times of the day because they're up and they think you're up, which means now you're not going to get any sleep and you still got to get up and go to work, and maybe they don't have an early morning class, so they're asleep. Okay, and that's when you really want to come and shake them out of bed. You need to say, okay, you know what? You need to start working on this or this or this. You can contact me maybe tomorrow at about 3 o'clock. In the meantime, don't keep sending me text messages. This is what I did with my own, at least. And I hear, Mom, stop being a dean, be my mother. I go, no, you say that for Oprah. This is what you need to do. Swear to God, this is what you need to do. So you're going to contact me tomorrow at 3. I'm going to expect the following things for you to have done. We'll talk about it then. But you need to start doing some of this yourself, okay? Otherwise, he's going to continue that, and that's not a good thing for you or him. And send them to me. I shouldn't have smiled that quickly. Another question over there? This is college. This is college. I'm sorry. You know, that we're putting that responsibility on them. Yeah. And tell them to keep it honest. And I tell students, let's call home together. Come on, let's call home. Another question on this side, or we're all set? One more down here. Well, we asked the professors to do that part with the thumbs up. Yeah, I'm busy sending to try to get the other ones to come in. So, but that's your job too. Yeah. And then Father Noel sends some things out to students as well. Yeah, he's the good guy. I'm the bad cop. One more. So can the Friars Club respond to that one? Did you hear what you just asked?
The weekly Civ meeting?
Mm-hmm. Weekly Civ meetings. Open session for Western Civ? Are you familiar with that?
Well, we just finished Civ. I just did last year. I'm a junior now. And I saw a lot of that, like, before exams. You'd see sessions, big sessions like that come out for Civ, but I don't recall seeing them, every week. So you do see them maybe before a midterm or before a final, but you do have to have your ears open and kind of be aware, know that that's happening.
Like the Facebook pages, this is just for parents, to like the Facebook pages, like for academic services, because then you can see when that kind of stuff is coming up. And my son sometimes misses, he is overwhelmed with emails and work and stuff, so I will send him, like, hey, did you see that there's a Western Civ review, or, just kind of things that I think he should be on top of.
And that's good. That's good to do. That's what we want. Okay, we'll be here for a few moments if anybody has any other questions. Thank you. We look forward to working with you.